All right, we're going to get started. So good evening. Come on, you can say it back. Good evening. Hey, that's better. You guys are trainable. This is going to be fun after all. Hey, my name is Michael Rogan. I am the head of corporate and strategic partners at HSBC, and I am thrilled to have everyone here, and I want to welcome you to it. It's probably one of the coolest facilities I've ever been in, although David told me to go to the NFL. It's a lot cooler, but let's see. But I was in the Hall of Fame here at the U of M, and that was pretty cool. HSBC, just a little bit about us. We are the world's leading international bank. We are, woo, all right, got to cheer for that one. That's more than I deserve, but that colleagues deserve more. We are in over 65 countries, and we serve over 40 million customers around the globe. And we do that not only through professional, helping individuals, small businesses, governments, institutions, corporates, those types of things. And we help money move easily, fast around the world. But we also do a lot of work in the major cities in the U.S., Miami obviously being one of them, and a major corridor for Latin America for us, which we're excited about. So we do a lot in our local communities. As I said, we're in the South Florida area. So you're going to meet a lot of our leadership team that is out in the crowd today. Today's a special day. We've been planning this now for a little while, and as we think about this, where the ideas came from and such. Rick Horrow, who I'll introduce here in a minute. Rick is the CEO of Horrow Sports Ventures, and Rick wrote a book, and this is based on basically life lessons on leadership from the legends of the game. And the book itself, there's over 100 collaborators, and we've got, I think, 13 here today, give or take, that have taken their time to spend with us. And what are we going to talk about? We're going to hear from them about sports, business, personal, a little bit of everything, technology. We're going to hear about innovation. And then we got the UM here in this awesome facility, and we're going to hear about technology and medicine and what's going on, how it relates to sports. So that's going to be really exciting for us. So I won't go through who the panelists are today. I'll let Rick do that in just a minute. But we're very happy to have them here, so thank you to everyone. So I want to also, just a couple of things. I want to thank the University of Miami and Carol Sofer for this facility. I've never seen anything like it, as I said earlier. She deserves a hand, I think. Give it up for Carol. So without further ado, I want to introduce Rick, as I said, CEO of Horrow Sports Ventures. Also, obviously an author. This is his third book, Rick? Yeah, third book. Yeah, well, they didn't get published. But Rick is also a sports business analyst with Reuters. He is a Fox News contributor, a weekly contributor, NBC Sports contributor as well, and just an overall sports guru. His moniker is the sports professor. I joke with him all the time that he made that up. I think he calls himself that. But Rick's been involved in over 100 deals for over $20 billion in sports. So if it happened over the last few decades in sports, there's a good chance he was part of it with maybe a lot of these people you're about to meet. So please join me in welcoming my friend, Rick Horrow.
That wasn't bad. Thank you, my man. We're going to keep this kind of informal because we have a lot of other folks, and we have a very specific timeline today, which I wanted to tell the organizers at the threshold that we are going to exceed because we have 10 or 15 really cool people that we want to get on stage and then off stage as well. I understand the University of Miami begins their practice tomorrow morning, and they need to take over the facility, so they take it over at midnight. And they, work for a few extra hours. What a great facility as far as recruiting and heading into the next generation. Panel 2, Blake, when we get into this, you should be, and you are, I'm sure, very proud of this facility, as well as the entire athletic program here at the University of Miami. Right? Exactly. But, pride doesn't begin to describe it. I grew up in Miami many years ago, Miami Beach, and I remember looking at downtown Miami, and the tallest building we had was the Southeast Bank building. No, not that one, the 10-story Southeast Bank building, and no arena, and no Marlins Park, and certainly no Robbie Stadium / Hard Rock. Clearly no Orange Bowl, but no baseball stadium and no tennis facility. And we thank some of the major entrepreneurs in our lives, and hopefully can make a little bit of a difference in providing some advice to people. The Sport Business Handbook's been out academically since last February. This is a time to kind of get it out consumer-wise. And HSBC and Mike Rogan and Morris Churchill and some of the guys have been very supportive in putting together what we believe will be a national tour and maybe international, but the branding of 50 years of the sports business. It's now over $1.3 trillion and going north. The North American sports market itself will be $80 billion by 2022. The media rights, about $24 billion. That doesn't count the next NFL cycle, which is going to be outrageous, as we know. Sponsorship, about $20 billion. Merchandising, $15 billion. Everything up a lot, and it's because of many of the entrepreneurs that we have in this room itself. The first panel basically talks about what just happened. Super Bowl 54 was the 11th year, and in many ways the best. Clearly one of the best Super Bowls ever. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Tom Garfinklel. Thank you, David Baker. Thanks everybody to making this a showcase that goes way beyond the $400 to $500 million economic impact. We're in the billions, and you can't even quantify the biggest issue, which is people in all walks of life all over the world may not know where South Beach is relative to the rest of the city, but you'd be damn sure after 9:30 last night and a 64-degree night and Sunset and Shakira and J-Lo, they know, yeah, Sunset and Shakira and J-Lo, they know exactly what's going on, exactly what's happening. So, thanks very much. And by the way, just a quick comment about all of this stuff. I was at Super Bowl II. I know that's hard to believe, but it was January 14th of 1968. And some interesting comparisons. You realize the ticket for Super Bowl II, $6. Today, I was holding in my hand, put it in plastic, the face NFL ticket, $3,300. TV ads were $40,000, even present value at $292,000. That's a lot of money. But Fox, even the spot ads, the average was about $5.3 million per 30-second spot, and they were sold out early, 5.3 to 5.6. A dollar hot dog, I remember because we shelled out a $1 hot dog in 1968. You could buy a South Florida seafood paella if you went to the right place at the stadium, but it cost you $34. It's amazing. You had to bring cash. The average lineman, and Mr. Baker and his son would appreciate this, Jerry Kramer in 1968 was 6'3", 245. You may not remember Jerry Kramer. He was an All-Pro for the Green Bay Packers. They won Super Bowl II. The average NFL lineman in Super Bowl 54 was 6'4", 313. 6'4", 313. And the payday, $15K for the winner, $7,500 for the loser at that time. They don't play for that. They play for pride. Yeah, it's a little different today. It's $124K for the winner and $62K for the loser. They play for pride, but there are a couple extra zeros to it. As far as South Florida is concerned, trivia question, really important. Only city in the rotation that had consecutive Super Bowls, 68, 69. Everybody remembers the Namath Guarantee. People may not remember the Raiders and the Packers Super Bowl II. The idea of the Dolphins and the Super Bowl host committee and everybody around the NFL working hand in hand, it was just absolutely incredible. And maybe the most important issue here, according to Wallet Hub and a survey that was done by the Quinnipiac folks, 1 in 2 would sacrifice their vacation days for a year to watch their team win the Super Bowl. And more than 1 in 3 would give up their annual bonus. Yeah, we'll see if it actually happens. But that's what they said. 1.4 billion was the number of chicken wings eaten during the weekend. 11.2 million pounds of chips. 8 million pounds of guacamole. 10 million pounds of ribs. You don't get that stat every day. And needless to say, antacid sales spiked today and yesterday. And needless to say also, there is a movement for a federal holiday that's Super Bowl Monday. It may or may not happen But, yeah. Well, but it starts, hey, federal holiday, but everybody comes to a 5 o'clock post-Super Bowl 50-year anniversary deal, which is built into this. So, look, the bottom line is we have a lot to cover today, and there are a lot of people that we would be remiss if we didn't include. The first panel, Super Bowl related. I'll introduce them in a couple of minutes, but it's also South Florida sports related to football and Hall of Fame and otherwise. Second panel, golf, sports medicine, University of Miami and UHealth and what they're doing, Rise and the philanthropic aspect of sports, Marlins, baseball. It's a grab bag. And then the reveal, which we'll keep within limits. Each one of our cities we're doing this in will have the top 10 sports moments of the last 50 years as done through a panel from the NYU Preston Robert Tisch Institute for Global Sports. Pretty significant, a lot of names in the title, but they went through a methodological analysis of what those issues were, and we're putting an objective connotation on a subjective issue, subject to debate, but we'll reveal those at the end of this. And it's part of the Sport Business Handbook's 50 top issues nationally. We're going to LA next month, and we'll do the 10 top issues in LA and hopefully everywhere else around the globe, which is really interesting. So before we do panel one, I want to do a personal tribute to a person who, as of 2 days ago, was coming. And he was pretty busy during Super Bowl doing a lot of different things. Don Shula is now 90 years old. He was a hero and everybody's hero, and you'll hear about the heroism, ironically, later on today. He wrote in the Sport Business Handbook, leaders are first honest with themselves about whether they're doing what they really should be doing. It requires self-introspection and willingness to admit your own mistakes and find other ways to do things. This requires honesty and objectivity. And those who played for Don Shula, I'm not sure open-mindedness was one of those traits back then, but it clearly has been. And South Florida owes a debt of significant and enduring gratitude to Don Shula. And I just wanted to open it up as a tribute to him. He would be here, and he had a presentation to give, and Don Shula clearly is here in spirit and will be a friend and a mentor for a long time. So thank you for being around and inspiring everybody here, Don Shula. Let's get to the panel. Panels. Tom Garfinklel, the president of the Miami Dolphins, the president of Hard Rock Stadium, the quarterback, coach, general manager, strategic advisor, everything good relative to the $500 million investment in Hard Rock Stadium and all of the other ancillary events around it, which has caused innumerable economic impact. Tom, welcome to the stage. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. But we're not.
Thank you.
You are.
I feel like I'm in Club Live in these chairs. Sure.
Yeah, you are. Although I was looking at Club Live yesterday. This is a little less expensive than what Club Live went for last night.
Have you ever seen anybody get more free advertising in your life than?
Absolutely not. All of those people were moving in back and forth, and they all had
Super
Club
Bowl,
Live hats on and everything.
Super Bowl Live, yeah.
Super Bowl Live. Rodney Barretto, since 1989, actively involved with the Super Bowl, including multiple host committee chairman roles. Very actively involved. There have been 3. I'll leave it at that because he would kill me if I talked about number 4 because he didn't offer. Barretto Group, a diversified company specializing in corporate and public affairs consulting. He's expanded into other areas. He's been an inspiration and somebody who has been a leader at attracting major events. Works really well with Garfinklel. Come on up.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, sit down. We'll get to you in a minute. This is the first time, I think, that there's been any context of David Baker in the last 3 weeks that has not been a complete surprise. David Baker was the mayor of Irvine, California. He was the commissioner of the Arena Football League. His claim to fame, although he may dispute it, is that his son was a tremendous offensive lineman for the Atlanta Falcons, USC. But David Baker has a pretty significant job himself. He's the president of the Hall of Fame in 2014. I can't believe you wrote this. It says his physical stature, 6'9" and 400 pounds, is overshadowed by his large vision for the Hall. That's pretty clear. Did you really write that?
You might have missed a line.
I don't see it in here, but that's okay. I got it. David Baker, come on up. Thank you very much. And I was just going to say, by the way, speaking of David, if you remember, I mean, his claim to fame is the protector, we'll talk about it in a minute, of one of the most endearing, iconic trusts of football fans. And the Hall of Fame gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and he'll talk about it. But what he's done the last 3 weeks as part of the legacy celebration to surprise Bill Cowher and the entire CBS set on national TV, and then surprise Jimmy Johnson on the entire Fox net set on national TV, hiding those 400 pounds behind a post was just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, we just got through with Bill Cowher today, and he's still crying. And Troy Polamalu was announced; he's crying. These guys from the Steelers are crybabies. Jimmy Johnson, I can tell you, he was truly surprised, and he's sucking oxygen. He needs it bad.
That's getting back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, too. Jim Ganley, international television executive extraordinaire. Since for 10 years he was the COO of Fox Sports Fox Pan Am Sports. Can I say, is it appropriate that I can say that you spent most of your time in Latin America, South America, but did not speak or understand a word of Spanish? Can I say that? All right, good. I'll be able to say that. SVP of No, I understand. All the colleagues down there, but he was head of finance administration for Hearst, ABC, Viacom, and there's nobody better to talk about television rights in the new millennium, especially after what Fox has come through and done, than Jim Ganley. Come on up. And by the way, just from your perspective, have you seen the program? Did you look at the program? You see his picture?
It's a joke. He came to one of my functions and had his high school picture. Sorry.
I mean, we asked.
I think I was in high school when that picture was taken.
No, I was in junior high school when that picture was taken. I said to people, be a little bit responsive and just make sure that you can have a contemporary picture. Well, you know, one man's contemporary is another museum piece, I guess is the answer. Specific. Finally, but certainly not least, I'm going to say it this way. Morris Churchill is the head of community development and sales administration for retail banking and wealth management with HSBC USA, the Morgan Chase retail regional sales manager. He is clearly one of the top banking executives in North America. But more important, he has been a lifelong Miami Dolphin fan at the highs and the lows, and then the highs again. Morris Churchill. It was every time we would do a conference call planning for this event, it was always on the heels of either winning a game that cost a draft pick or a draft position or losing early, and it was one of those, why the Dolphins do A, B, C, and D? And I said, you know, do I look like the general manager or do I look like the president? Well, now you have a shot, okay? So definitely have a shot.
All right.
Okay. So let's start with Tom. Let's start with you. Okay. Give me your first. It's easy. Your impression of Super Bowl 54. Did it live up to your expectations? And what's next as far as Hard Rock and using it as a platform to bring in even more economic impact for the region?
I think it probably exceeded my expectations. The feedback that we've received, so far has been fantastic. I think, look, the things that you can't control, the matchup, the weather, some of those things, worked out just perfectly. So I thought it was a beautiful day. It was a great football game. So the things that we could control, we did our best that we could do. And, it needs to be said, I think, the NFL does a great job putting on this event. Peter O'Reilly and his team, and the Super Bowl host committee led by Rodney, really drives, this event happening and everything that goes on with it. So, a lot of people on the Hard Rock Stadium team, from security to guest services to IT to, just a lot of work for a long time. But it's really Rodney and his leadership that got the game here, and obviously Steve's investment in the stadium and making it what it is. So very proud. A lot of work went into it, and I think it was, we had a great week.
Well, and Steve's investment clearly front and center. Some of you live in Palm Beach County? 2 or 3. Do you still have to get a passport to cross over? I'm actually kidding. I live up in Jupiter too, and one of the problems is, this is a good example. Steve Ross was front page on the Palm Beach Post on Sunday, and well-deserved. And the story, which is long overdue, and everybody says it, but it's better for others, that $500 million or so is dollars that inure to the benefit of the community more than the ROI of a specific stadium or team. It's not to maximize concession sales. It's not to give you the excuse to increase ticket prices. It might be collateral, but it's really to give the NFL and special events and other things the opportunity to come down here and generate significant economic impact. So,
well, yeah, he's now, over $550 million in the renovation, over $70 million in the tennis center to keep the Miami Open tennis event here in Miami. Over $125 million now in the new training facility, football facility that's going on the site there in Miami Gardens. So, it's over $700 million of investment, and I think, Steven's going to be 80 years old this year. I don't think he expects to see a $700 million return on that investment, in his lifetime. So I think for him, this is really about wanting to do the right thing for Miami, wanting to be a best-in-class organization, do things the right way. I know the tennis tournament, for example, was, something he just, to be perfectly honest, we don't make a lot of money off that.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And it's going to take a long time to make back $70 million from the tennis tournament. But it's a source of pride. And to give everybody an indication, last night at 4 a.m, the Hard Rock Stadium team was there taking the grass out of the field. By 9 o'clock this morning, the field was gone. Right now, if you went to Hard Rock Stadium right now, you would see Terraplast all over where the field used to be. Terraplast is the plastic flooring. And they'll start constructing the stadium court for tennis really starting today. We have 30 less days to do it than we had last year, so it's going to be tight, and we have to get that done. So it's a constant thing between having the Super Bowl, tennis. We're working hard to try to bring a Formula One race here, which to Miami Gardens and the Hard Rock Stadium campus. The track would be right there on the campus, about a 3.5-mile track. And that's like bringing a Super Bowl every year in terms of economic impact. It's really the largest sport in the world in terms of dollars and fans and everything else globally. Certainly Super Bowl is the biggest event in the world, and the NFL is the biggest thing in the country. But so that would be fantastic when we get that done, and we're just trying to keep doing great things.
there will be some news on that, hopefully. Stay tuned. Steve, in the context of this conversation, which is really important, you wrote in the Sport Business Handbook, he said, I also found the complexity of the deal, buying the Dolphins, a pleasure. I'm not sure writing $1 billion check is a pleasure, but he put it that way. The more complex, the better, because it narrows the playing field and allows me to play a bigger game and be challenged by people who want to play a bigger game. I'm glad I did. Without purchasing the Dolphins, I wouldn't have been able to do the many other sport-related ventures that I do now. So, per your argument.
Yeah, I think, funny story about that. So when I first got here, I sat down with Steve and I said, you don't really own the team, right? He said, I paid $1 billion for this team, Tom. I said, no, the team is really, you're the steward of a public trust, and the team was here before you got here, and it'll be here long after you're gone. And Steve really understands that, and that's part of what this is. It's being a great steward, the things we do in the community with Football Unites or Junior Dolphins, promoting the game of football. With the University of Miami, the Dolphins Cancer Challenge, which is coming up. We've raised now over $32 million. Thank you. Fort Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. So those are the things that, this is a platform to do things to positively impact people's lives. And that's really how Steve, we're very fortunate to have an owner that approaches it that way, and we do. So it's great.
The Dolphins and a public trust, those of us who grew up in South Florida, and Tom may know this story, but I'll digress for a minute. My dad had terminal melanoma in 1966, and his last visit to me was at Mount Sinai Hospital, and he gave me 4 tickets to the then expansion Miami Dolphins and said, "We're going to love this. We're going to go together." Of course, he knew that he wouldn't make it. And a few weeks later, this was the 4 seats that I continue to have through Joe Robbie and through Wayne. And I don't sit in them a lot, but it's a tribute. And a lot of people in South Florida measure their memories of growing up, the Mariel boat lift. There are a lot of things that happen in South Florida that are keyed to the success of the Miami Dolphins. I found out from Dick Anderson yesterday that 14 of those Dolphins are no longer with us, which is an incredible comment. So the point is, this is a treasure. Steve Ross understands it. Tom is the keeper of that treasure, and we owe a debt of gratitude to Steve and Tom, those that have come before that have made the Dolphins what they are, honestly. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Yeah. I think the first thing I did when I got this job, I got in, and Nat Moore, who runs our alumni group and does a fantastic job, I said I'd like the phone numbers, and I called all 7 living, all the Hall of Famers, and just introduced myself and said if there's ever anything you need. So that was day one. I think those are the men that built the Miami Dolphins, the men in the Hall of Fame, and all the players that came before, and people that worked in this industry. Made it possible for us to have the jobs we have, do the things we do, and I'll be sitting here talking about it. So yeah, I have great admiration, respect, and appreciation for all those.
And the other thing about Tom Garfinkel, he is gracious. He returns people's phone calls on a regular basis. He can now go to using his real cell phone. He told me before this event that he had 13,247,518 Super Bowl ticket requests before the event. Something close.
I have a lot of old friends became new friends again.
Yeah, new friends again. Sure. The 8th grade teacher who didn't call you and then waited 2 hours. Hey, by the way.
Yeah.
The other thing about what the stadium does is it enables, and we all maybe remember the history of the gap between Super Bowls, between 6 and 7 or 7 and 8 in South Florida, and the problems of not having a stadium that was Super Bowl capable, and we're over that. We're going to get many Super Bowls, and I don't have to say it, it's obvious. But one of the things that's important in a community is not just the facility, but the confidence in a host committee. Rodney Barretto has been the chairman of the host committee now for the 3rd year?
3rd time.
And so, again, indebted to Rodney, not only for his stewardship, but for coming all the way down here and getting this done today. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Frank Sapovitz, who some of you may know, he's also in the book, and it's important to remember. Peter O'Reilly is today the special events director of the Super Bowl for the NFL. Frank was his predecessor, and he said in the book, the Super Bowl is undeniably the greatest one-game event in the world. It's a phenomenon so ingrained in American culture that an entire nation will watch live coverage of a partial stadium blackout. He was referring to New Orleans. Captivated to such an extent that the viewership rating places the game among the top 10, such an extent that every game is in the top 10 of all time. Entertainment and marketing behemoth. Obvious. How would you describe the impact of Super Bowl 54 in South Florida?
Well, obviously, it's much more than a game. I mean, the game is only 4 hours, and maybe 4.5 if we get a lot of calls, referee calls. But listen, the impact to the region, if you look at Miami in particular, you got Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach airports. You have a host of over 100,000 hotel rooms for people to come to visit. We have probably the best restaurants in America here in our region. So from that perspective, if you just look at TV, if you look at what a commercial goes for, $5.5 million, a 30-second spot, we probably got in excess of $200 million worth of free publicity from Super Bowl. for our area.
Which is hard to quantify. I know
It
there are
is.
some formulas that try to take advantage of that, but really one of those things that it's anecdotal. A lot of it's anecdotal, right?
Yeah, and again, to Tom's point, you got to thank Steve Ross. When I first met Steve, when he was part owner of the Dolphins, and Wayne still actually owned the team, Steve said back then that he was going to make this an entertainment complex. He had a vision. Tom's executed that vision like right to the T. And Tom is there day in and out. I don't know if anybody's seen, what do you call it? Bud Light? What's the Bud?
Sky View, I think.
Sky View. We have a ski lift at Mayflower.
Gondola.
And, but
Rodney's not in charge of branding.
no, but it just goes to show you that if you go to the stadium, it's like pulling up to a first-class hotel. It's lush landscaping, beautiful flowers, and it's so beautiful. The stadium is beautiful at night. It's remarkable. Everybody saw the pictures from last night. It's just you can't buy that.
Let's talk about your execution and your, not in the same way. Do you remember the John McKay line about, are you in favor of Tampa Bay's execution? He said, I'm all for it. Different kind of execution. This is your execution of how you put together the last 3 successful Super Bowls. And Bob Greasy in the book makes an interesting comment about teamwork. He said, competitiveness can create greatness. It doesn't always mean doing it alone. For example, in the Super Bowl of our undefeated season, I threw only 10 or so passes. Coach Shula told me to call the plays in the huddle, so if I wanted to be the MVP, I could have thrown 25 or 30 to get my stats up, but that's not what we needed to do to win. Describe the teamwork of acquiring and implementing a successful Super Bowl.
Of course, it's I'm a volunteer, so I always often tell people I'm a professional beggar. So I'm always looking for money. But we did assemble a group of professionals to execute this. We hold the contract with the NFL. And what you saw yesterday is not the host committee. That is the NFL. That's their production, their halftime show. They execute all that. They have that perimeter. It's what they call a SEER 1 event. SEER 1 is a federal designation where the President of the United States appoints, he's got an appointment. He put the special agent in charge of the FBI as his point person. That brings all the federal resources here. People couldn't imagine what was in the sky, what was behind the curtain that was here protecting that game, all the fans and all the folks part of that game. If anybody's going to try to make a statement, it would be at a Super Bowl. Because remember, this game is broadcast to over 70 countries. It's viewed by over 100 million people. The largest sporting event in America. And it's just one of those events that takes a lot of coordination. So from that perspective, we had several different divisions. We had a whole security division. For the first time 10 years ago, we didn't talk about human trafficking and sex trafficking. We had a whole campaign on that. It was really received really well by the NFL, who helped us. They were a sponsor of it. And it was received really well by the public. And we also had a minority program, which we went out into the community. We held 5 different seminars, and we brought in over 1,700 small companies. And between the NFL and the host committee, we pared it down to 300, who we taught them how to do business with the NFL, and we managed expectations. So that's a whole nother facet that goes along. We also did a big environmental program. We looked at the stadium and said the stadium sits between the ocean and the Everglades. The Ocean Conservancy came to us and says, this is a platform that we want to talk about no plastics in the water or no plastics on the beaches. And so they became a sponsor of the host committee, and we built a whole campaign around it. To Tom's credit, and for those of you, Tom will he can tell the story, but he watched a 60-minute documentary on plastics in the ocean, and he had his whole team eliminate all plastics in the stadium. Would it take you 10 days, right?
Yeah.
So for the first time at the stadium, Tom, you tell the story, because it's a great story, and everybody is applauding you for your efforts.
Thank you. I was literally watched 60 Minutes, this episode, and it occurred to me that, when you're in a position to lead change, you have a responsibility to do it. So I thought, well, this isn't a political thing. This isn't a statement to say, okay, if you drink out of a plastic water bottle or drive an SUV, you're a bad person. Nothing like that. It was just, I got a committee together. I said, listen, I want to know what it would take to eliminate all single-use plastics at the stadium. And they looked at me like I was crazy and said, well, you mean like we'll change out the straws for paper straws? I said, no. Everything. I want it all gone, all of it. Because just doing straws isn't enough. And so it took about 2 months. They came back and said, well, and they came into the conference room, big conference table, and you couldn't see the top of the table because they had one piece of every plastic, every unit item that we use in the stadium. And it just filled the table with one of everything. And so we learned that we do about 600,000 plastic water bottles a year, 500,000 plastic cups. And they went out and innovated and found these aluminum cups, and we went with Pepsi, and we have Aquafina water in aluminum cans. And so we went forward, and we've eliminated over 99% of the single-use plastics at Hard Rock Stadium now, which will eliminate 2.7 million pieces of plastic a year. But more importantly, thank you. More importantly, doing that and having the Super Bowl to kind of launch this,
Right.
we're now telling the story, and I'm going to work with the commissioner of the NFL to try to put together a standard for what other teams can do. But if we have, let's call it, 500 stadiums follow our lead, and now you're talking about over 1.5 billion pieces of plastic we can eliminate from the oceans. Then we set an example also, okay, if we can do this, maybe Starbucks can do it, maybe McDonald's can do it, maybe, and the next thing you know, it just compounds from there. So we really wanted to set an example of doing, my goal was 99+%, and we've gotten there, so we're proud of that, yeah.
So Rick, to your point, part of the host committee's responsibility is to deal with all the local governments. So we deal with the state of Florida, the governor, right down to the mayor of Miami-Dade County, Carlson Menace, to the mayor of Miami Beach, Mayor Gelber, to the mayor of Miami Gardens, Mayor Gilbert, the mayor of the city of Miami, Mayor Suarez. And so that's a juggling act in itself. Who speaks first, where do they stand, how they help you. So it's, for the host committee, we got to raise private dollars and public dollars from everybody. And then we got to deal with the NFL. We got to get in-kind services from the government to help pay for different things, or police and fire and cleanup. So then when you work with the NFL, they have their whole list of sponsors. You got to stay away from them. And so you got to get real creative on the private side. I'll give you a good example. We are negotiating with Hard Rock to actually sponsor Super Bowl Live in Bayfront Park. And what we did is we negotiated with them for over 2 years, and we had a great package that they were getting ready to sign off on, and the NFL cuts a deal with Caesars. And it calls us up and says, stay away from Hard Rock. You can't talk to them no more. So those are the kind of, now you got to backpedal. I want to recognize Brian Bishop, who was our senior manager of our putting together all our packaging. He's actually going to go work for the soccer team now, the new soccer team in Miami. So he did a phenomenal job putting together the packages and the benefits and making this happen.
Well, it's an interesting concept, and you're a juggler, visionary entrepreneur, and whether you do it or someone else does it, the Super Bowl is in really good hands when it returns in the not-too-distant future. New Orleans is committed. The farthest out, I guess it's Tampa, L.A., Glendale, New Orleans, but it'll be back. It'll be back. It'll be back many, many times. And so part of the next step, and we're going to show the film on how Miami acquired the Super Bowl. We will know how. We'll do it during a break, mindful of everybody's time here. So, and David Baker, the president of the Hall of Fame, interesting comment that you wrote in the Sport Business Handbook. You said the game itself. Let's talk about that for a second, because you are in many ways the trustee of the game itself. Focusing on the values in the game actually makes the game more valuable. Every great empire was built on values of competition. The Greeks had the Olympics, the Persians their equestrian events, the Romans their gladiators. But those events began to appeal mostly to the prurient interests of entertainment, the thumbs up or thumbs down in the Colosseum. That's when the empire began to crumble. So in many ways, the game itself remains the most important thing we do, right?
Yeah, I think so. Lincoln said that a country that does not honor its legends, its heroes, will not long endure. And I think the more you talk about the values of the game at its core, yes, it's entertainment, and yes, money is important to it. But I still think back from the days of Shakespeare, it is all about courage and a fall from grace and resurrection and redemption. And yes, entertainment is important to us, and a lot of people are tuning in for halftime. But what you read and then what I wrote in your book, I stole from Will and Ariel Durant, who wrote The History of Civilization. And their belief was, it's something that I think HSBC would be interested in, is that a competitive economy, that it continues to improve, is built upon competitive values. Of people that love competition, of people that have a competitive spirit, where losing is not, respectfully, I mean, this wasn't the season that the Dolphins wanted to have, but it wasn't a shame losing. It was a shame not to compete. And they got the best win they'd had in a long time against the Patriots up there. And that makes you better from that standpoint. I will tell you, this is probably our 35th Super Bowl, something like that. Not as much as Norma Hunt, who's been to every one. But I thought it was one of the best. I thought it was safe. I always felt safe in this. Competitive. It was efficient. Everything here was clean and shined. It was spectacular. The stadium was fantastic. But I also loved something we participated in, was seeing those guys who made up the all-centennial team. Those 100 guys that were the best to ever play.
That was special.
And I'll tell you, I got Hall of Famers who didn't quite make that team, but I'm up in that suite with those guys, and guys are going, oh, man. You know who that is? And again, what I tell you is we do kind of like to think that we're guardians of the game, and we take it very seriously in Canton, Ohio. But I will also tell you, from getting to know these guys, as Tom has for his guys, they didn't fall out of bed great. They're not perfect. But they fought to be great. And greatness in our business is not, pristine and clean and perfect. Greatness in our business is snot coming out of your nose and blood coming out of your mouth and a horribly filthy, dirty uniform and being exhausted. And I think by looking at those values, they will not only get you a bronze bust in Canton, Ohio, but they can make you a better banker. They can make you a better mom or a dad. They can make Miami a better community, or our country a better country. So these values are something we believe also brings great value to the economics of what happens.
Well, and just to follow up on that, which I think is very important for everybody, is that David Baker has been the keeper of that iconic trust since 2014. Perfect role now, perfect qualifications to assume that role. Great things at the Hall of Fame, great capital improvements that are happening, but you could really see the emotion on Howard Johnson, everybody's faces. That's got to be a favorite part. That knock on the door has to be the favorite part of your life, isn't it?
There's a lot. This is the most fun job in the world, I got to tell you. You get to give the guys the gold jackets. We have been to Hard Rock Stadium to give guys their Hall of Fame Ring of Excellence, and it is cool. I mean, at every NFL game at halftime, mostly during the season, guys are getting a beer and they're going to the bathroom, and when we give that ring, Tom's been with us there. I mean, they are in their seat, they're standing up in reverence of this man's journey. And it is great. Unfortunately, just before I knock on the door, I also got to call the guys that didn't make it, because we hate disappointing them, but we certainly don't want to disrespect them. But I think what was really cool about Bill Cowher and Jimmy Johnson, and we really have a debt to pay, to thank Sean McManus at CBS and then Eric Shanks at Fox. But what was really cool about it is that all America got to see what it means to these guys. When you knock on their door, or when you surprise them on the set, listen, a carrier pigeon could do my job. All I do is thank them for all they've done to the game. I welcome them with Canton and promise them that we're going to keep their legacy alive forever and tell the story of their journey. But I'll tell you, in that moment, they're not thinking about their records, and they're not thinking about their Lombardis. They're thinking about their mom, who drove them to practice every day, or their dad that wouldn't let them quit, or the coach that inspired them. Tom, like you were talking about your high school coach, and I was just talking to Tom in the wings over here as we were doing it, and if I could quote you, He said, as a high school quarterback up in Walnut Creek, Tom said, I learned more from football than anything else in my life except my mom and dad. And I think there's a lot of people like this. And I'll tell you, Bill Cowher is a proud, private man. And that jaw on the sideline, it juts out there about 3 yards. And, but I'll tell you, when he saw his daughter and his wife, I mean, he was quivering, he was a bowl of jelly, and like I said, he still hasn't stopped crying. And Jimmy, he actually has an inhaler, and he couldn't talk. But, for all these guys, that's what it is. And again, the great benefit of this that I love, my son did make a lot of money standing on the shoulders of other guys here. Our son did. But it is also for firemen and soldiers and police officers and teachers and preachers. And the lessons are the same. Respectfully, and for those in the media, please take this in the context of which is given. I have a great respect for our educators. But for those of us who played any sport, when we're going through a divorce or trying to save our marriage or a healthcare crisis or a financial crisis or crisis of integrity, we're not going back to our calculus teacher or our chemistry teacher, but we all go back to our coach. That guy taught you how to keep going when you didn't think you could go on, or how to get up when you got knocked on your butt in life. And that happens to all of us. I don't want to take up the rest of your panel's time, but the really cool thing that I get to do is sit and listen to Hall of Famer again and again and again. Not about their biggest hits or their greatest plays, but about somebody who inspired them, about somebody who changed their life. Don Shula, who was going to be here. Don Shula's dad is a fisherman on Lake Erie, and he's telling me the story that he's going to be a fisherman because that's what his dad does, and that's the only avenue that's opening up in Ohio. And he gets seasick. He hates being on a boat or fishing at that time. And he pulls up in his dad's pickup truck to get some gas. And the guy who pulls up on the other side of the aisle is the coach at John Carroll University. He says, Don, what are you going to do now? I've seen you play. And he says, I'm going to be a fisherman with my dad. He says, well, I don't know if you're interested, but I got half a scholarship left. If he doesn't pull up to that gas station, to that aisle, at that moment, he's not the winningest coach in the history of the National Football League with 347 wins. And that's what I love, is how people get inspired, how
Pretty
it
sure he'd be
changes
the
their
best
life.
damn fisherman in
Yeah,
Ohio,
that's
though.
right. He would set any fisherman's record. You know what's interesting about this panel? I know there are people wanting to move this along. I wish we had twice as much time and twice as many. We have a second panel to deal with too. So that's all words to live with. But the one thing that is also important is that all of this has been made possible on a global stage by television. And so Jim Ganley, who's run Fox Sports Latin America for so many years, your comment in the book was that the sport business is innovative for people who do the impossible. Innovation in the broadcast industry has changed how fans view sport and how new technologies create new business. And who'd have thought 50 years ago that sport would have changed as drastically as it has? You wrote that. Explain what that means.
Back in 1957, I remember traveling 300 miles in a car to go watch the New York Giants play. I think it was Green Bay, but it was out of market. You couldn't watch it in your home stadium, so we drove to the Poconos, I was a New Jersey guy, and we got snowed in, so we couldn't watch the game there. So we drove over to Pennsylvania. But now, I mean, you can watch a football game on your iPad, on your phone. I mean, technology has gone. You go from little black and white sets in 1957 to 75, 85-inch TVs now. Used to have 2 or 3 cameras. Now what we have, probably 40 or 50 at Dolphin Stadium. We got 5G. We used to have to run cables all over the place. Golf. We could only do 6 or 7 holes because we had to run cables miles out to the golf course. Now we got Wi-Fi and that kind of technology. You got color TV now. I mean, you said the games are now 4 hours. Well, we got a lot of commercials now too. That changed the game tremendously to be able to pay all the race fees that we have. But now, when you look at a football game yesterday, you had first down markers. You didn't have that years ago. Yeah, it's the third quarter. It's the time. How many yards to go? You got the green field. I mean, that's all television and the new technology that change it. And we got high definition television. The sets that Fox was superimposing on television yesterday was outstanding.
Well, and the one thing that Paul Tagliabue, who wanted to be here as well, as Diane knows, and was not able to be here, but he is a contributor. And it is interesting because one of his comments that he made in the book about future trends is decisions in the future must embrace social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google, Netflix, and even a retailer like Amazon. He's ahead of his time. He's already negotiating the next set of TV negotiations for the NFL. But what does that mean, and what do you think the future holds?
Future, I mean, with all the technology, you could see the Dolphin fans just getting on computers or Twitters now, but you could actually have it where, automatically you're talking to your friends. Oh, look at that pass, that's no good, and da-da-da-da-da. And it just, the sky's the limit with this. You have your own camera. I mean, you can put, even on some of the channels now, you can pick which camera you want to watch. I mean, you can become your own production team without, plus the teams will have their own channels or whatever. I mean, back in the day, you had 3 channels. Now you got 700 of them. DirecTV has 15 games going at one time.
Not to mention the rights fee negotiations, which will cause more revenue to pay more players more money, which I'm sure is a comment that people will just want to smile at and turn the other way. Morris, you need the last word in all of this, not because you're the strategic advisor to a lot of this, but you've been a 50-year Dolphin fan and you have some significant history, not only with the team, but you can kind of monitor all of these trends from all of these fine folks. So give us some conclusions from your perspective.
Wow. The first thing I want to say, Rick, is thank you, for having me be here. I'm very blessed and humbled to really sit up here with all these distinguished guests. So thank you for having me up here. As I sit back, a lot of things are going through my mind, and I was jotting down notes, last night, and then just kind of listening to the guests here, and there are a lot of similarities, not only with my life, and how not only working in financial services, but playing sports. I grew up, started when I was 6 years old, playing football that wasn't organized because we just played tackle football on the street, so that's how I learned. I didn't play organized football until I was 9, and I look back at what the game gave to me, and I think of some of the buzzwords that I heard up here, and some are our core values with HSBC. You talk about leadership, and I grew up in a military family, so that helped also. You talk about organization. You talk about execution, you talked about values and overall teamwork. If there was a number one thing that I learned in sports, specifically football, is I'm no better than the weakest person on my team. And as David had alluded to, and you actually started to get me excited there, you started talking about snot and blood, and I was getting ready to run in there and ask Manny to give me one of his helmets so I could suit up, out there again. But yeah, it's the passion that you learn, when you are playing sports, and how you can take, those same core values and bring them over. I'd like to think that has helped me, in my success in business. I looked at the involvement in the community as part of my responsibility at the bank, is the community development for the bank. So I get to work with a lot of different nonprofits throughout the U.S., a lot of community development financial institutions, and I look at the work that the NFL has done over the years. The NFL has been around over 100 years. HSBC has been around over 150. And throughout that time, the NFL has reached an international stage that who would have thought, when I was playing a long time ago, that it would go outside of the U.S. And as Mike Rogan had alluded to beforehand, HSBC is in over 65 countries throughout the world. And then I was listening to, I know we have over 50 million customers that we reach throughout the world. And then just listening here today is seeing how now the NFL has reached over 100 million in just one game. That's just outstanding work. So I'm really excited to be here, and I wish to share one last thing, because everybody always asks me that, and I have been a Dolphin fan for over, it's closing in on 50 years, and I've never lived in South Florida. And how it happened was, and the first Super Bowl that I can remember was Super Bowl VI back in 1972, and Miami got trounced. It was, I think, 24-3 by the Dallas Cowboys. And back in those days for Christmas, my mother used to always say you'd hand out the Montgomery Ward catalog or the Sears catalog, and you circle some things in there that you wanted to get for Christmas, and you might have gotten one or two of them. And I had just I saw the Miami Dolphins play, and I was just so enamored with the colors and the game of football, and I've been a fan ever since. And that's when I was speaking to Tom before. I said he controls my future happiness in getting the Miami Dolphins back on track. So.
Hey, Morris, thank you very much. The only guy in history of merchandising who will stake his merchandising boatload for he and his family to a team after they just got trounced 24-3 in a championship game, but that's his judgment. That's okay. End of panel one. Come back quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rodney, good job.